This is a Beech 18, actually a D18S, 1948 Twin Beech. And we're going to be giving a little tour around the airplane, a quick pre-flight, and just kind of show the airplane off a little bit. So the first and most important part of any aircraft is the engine. And this airplane has a Pratt & Whitney R985 radial engine. All the cylinders are actually in a circular pattern instead of having horizontal cylinders like most of the aircraft do. It's a very reliable engine. They do leak oil on purpose or just by the nature of the way they're designed. So, you know, around a lot of radial engines, you'll see oil capture devices, which is something that you'll see in the video when we're doing the pre-flight. So it's, you know, it's a pretty neat engine. All the cylinders being in a circular pattern, they're all exposed to the air equally. They all cool really good. The problem with it is because they are in a circular pattern, you have some of the cylinders that sit down here along the bottom of the engine, and so when you shut the engine down, all the oil that's up here in the top cylinders leaks down to the bottom cylinders, and over a few days they start to drip. Now this particular aircraft has been outfitted with some devices that actually you screw into the bottom of the engine, and it takes that oil, puts it into a jug, and then we just pour it back into the engine when we're done. So the process is not very difficult. This aircraft also doesn't really leak a whole lot. It's been kind of surprising how well these engines are holding the oil in, but nothing you know tremendously different about this engine on this aircraft and the one that you see on a Stearman or a crop duster. They are supercharged and carbureted, so they have carburetors on them and a supercharger that actually delivers the fuel to all the cylinders. They have a very distinct sound when they crank up, which you'll see in just a bit when we crank the aircraft up. Now this particular aircraft has quite a few additions to it. The airplane in its original state had the air intake in the cowling. One of the problems that this imposed is that the air that came through to the carburetor and to the supercharger, it actually came through the engine compartment, which heated the air up before it got into the actual engine again to burn. So this particular aircraft has been outfitted with the air intake underneath the cowling, which is actually part of the 10200 upgrade or the 102 upgrade. Now, one of the other additions on this airplane are new gear doors, and you'll see how the back of the gear door actually hooks around. And so what happens is when the wheel comes up into the wheel well, the gear doors are designed to fit in behind the wheels, which adds to your speed of the aircraft, and they also are designed to be able to put down at a faster speed. Another addition to the aircraft are the exhaust pipes. They are up inside the cowling, so they no longer, it originally had a great big exhaust pipe that sat out here in the wind. This again helps to increase the speed of the aircraft. This airplane still has the cowl flaps on it, which I really like because you can keep them open to keep the engine cool on a hot day. But when you close these things up, you actually gain about 7 to 10 knots in airspeed. So it really makes a difference being able to close these doors up. In addition to those modifications, the aircraft also has the longer wing tips. These are squared off wing tips. They've got the nav lights in the ends of them. The original aircraft actually had round wings on the end. So this again is part of the 102 upgrade. to allow it to carry more weight, and supposedly helps it with the speed as well. This aircraft at about 10,000 feet, on a summer day, I haven't flown it in the winter yet to know what it does in the winter, but on a pretty warm summer day, at 10,000 feet, burning about 40 to 42 gallons an hour, and that's about 25 inches of manifold and 1900 on the RPM. It cruises about 165 knots, so it's not a slow airplane. It's fairly respectable to be as big as it is, and to have such big engines hanging out on the front of it. I didn't mention it earlier, but the R985 engines are actually 450 horsepower supercharged engines, so they do fairly well at 10,000 feet. Now, another addition to this aircraft, and it's a part of the 10200 or 102 upgrade, and it's also helps with the speed of the aircraft, but it does make it a little bit more difficult to land, is there is no incidence in the tail any longer. So normally the tail didn't, when you came down the fuselage, the tail actually had a slope to it on its own, and it helped with flying the airplane at slower speeds, for example, landing. This airplane has actually had the tail incidence removed, so that it slopes off the fuselage and stays in a straight line, which helps it at the higher speed cruises, but makes it a little bit more difficult to land when you're landing it. It's not terribly difficult, but you're not going to 3-point land this aircraft. If you do, you'll be pretty lucky. Another addition to this airplane is there have been extra windows placed in it, so I don't know exactly what the original configuration looked like. We're going to actually be replacing these windows because while they look good on the outside, they actually have some pretty bad hazing on the inside. But that's another one of the upgrades, and it has nothing to do with the 10.2 upgrade. It's just something that they did. These aircraft actually have more changes that you can do to them, official changes that you can do to them, than any other aircraft flying today. They've been it's also the highest produced and the longest running production aircraft ever produced. So it's a pretty neat airplane to have. I'm very, very happy to be flying it. So one of the things that's pretty important when you're flying an airplane that burns 40 to 50 gallons an hour, depending on how fast you want to fly, is gas. This aircraft actually has 282 gallons of usable fuel. It has an 80-gallon nose tank that you can fill up. Both engines just run off that single tank if you want. And then it has a front tank that holds 75 gallons, and then a rear tank that holds 25 gallons. Taking off and landing, you always use the main tanks, the front tanks for those, but then all the rest of them are used for cruise. Now, one of the things that you do with this aircraft, you don't really need it on this side, the ladder, but you put the flaps down when you're fueling it or putting oil in it, because it actually helps you to get up and on it. These are really big flaps. They actually have steps here on the flap that you can step on if you want, but they're really hard to climb over the top of to get to the wing so that you can get up to the oil and the fuel. So this is your 25-gallon aux. Up here is your main tank, and then your oil up on top of the engine. So in this airplane, I have been running it around 6 gallons of oil. It holds 8. But like I said, it doesn't leak very much. It doesn't burn very much. Right now, it is sitting pretty close to 6 on the dipstick. I've got a bit that I have reclaimed from the engine by putting the drains in that I spoke about, and we're going to pour that back in, and that's going to get us pretty close to back to 6 gallons. Now, one of the things that you have to do on a radial engine, and it has to do again with that oil draining down. One thing, you know, us draining the oil out the bottom helps with this, but you still want to make sure that you pull the prop through. And the way that I do it and the way that I've been told to do it is to count the cylinders 20 times. So you end up pulling the prop through 5 or 10 times. But what you're doing is, it's possible that one of the cylinders will actually fill up with oil, and you'll get what's called hydraulic locking, which will completely destroy the engine if it happens. And so the purpose of pulling the engines through, and if you see somebody with a Beech 18 or an old radial engine like this out pulling their engine before they crank it up, is to make sure that you don't have a bunch of oil in one of the cylinders that can actually cause that to hydraulically lock. So by pulling it through, you're feeling for any of the cylinders to feel like it's just stuck. And if you hit a cylinder like that, then you've got to stop, and you may have to pull a plug to let the oil drain out. But it's pretty rare if you're flying the airplane a lot. You know, I don't know how often that actually happens, but it is something that you don't want to destroy the engine over a simple prop pull.
My head strong, beating on ya. I got a head on your banking on me now. That's just no love song, lullabies. I was an alibi, just an alibi. I got a red one leaning on ya. I got a head when you race me to the ground. Don't show your cards and you come and try. You'll only come and try, won't ya? You're the star, you just don't wanna be. Your head start gaining on ya. You didn't then, but you're banking on me now. You got me walking down this lonely road, the only thing I'll ever know. Stuck in the background, waiting on ya. Why did you think you could ever put me down? They threw me right into the flames. You took your time to fuel the blaze. You just